It is 3:08 PM on Thursday, April 24th, 2025, and this regular meeting of the Sandpoint Urban Forestry Commission is now called to order in council chambers at City Hall, 1123 West Lake Street, Sandpoint, Idaho. For the record, I am Commission Vice Chair Chase Youngdahl presiding. Also present are Commission members Preston Andrews, Paige Belfry, and Jeff Gregory. Chairs Mose Dunkel is absent. In addition to our board members, City Council Liaison Kyle Schreiber is attending remotely. City Staff Liaison Eric Bush and Board Clerk Samantha Branscombe are present. Before we move into our first agenda item, we do have a member of the public attending. And John, if you wanted to address the commission, I could give you a few minutes here on the front end to do that if you'd like.
Just a few minutes.
Yeah, why don't you come up to the mic and.
Yeah, it's John Gaddis,
provided
Sandpoint resident, and an arborist, out of Sandpoint, certified arborist. I just want to bring it to your attention. I was at the Russell Sports, the new playground, which was awesome. My son really enjoyed it. He's 11 and thought it was pretty sweet. I thought it was sweet. We all had fun. I was a little disheartened to find out though that I consider most of those trees to be improperly planted. And I was also disappointed to find out the proportion of maples that were planted around the sports center. So I did an inventory this afternoon. So I just was there this weekend. Did an inventory this afternoon of 69 trees newly planted around the parking lot and around the center. I've tallied 16 were maples in Acer. Okay, and that's 23%. So, and then an additional 4 were fraxinus, which is ash trees. And that's something you all can talk about. I think that's very unwise to be planting that species right now, knowing that we have the emerald ash borer established on this side of the Continental Divide in Oregon. So I want to bring that to your attention. About the maples, we have on page 58 of the Urban Forestry Management Plan. In bold, the city should enact a moratorium on planting any maple species in the public sectors. So I was rather shocked to see that we're planting that many maples. And I'm not here to assess blame. It happened. I don't want to see them pulled up. I would like to see them properly planted. But this is a 2-year-old document, 2022. So well before, I think before even the contractors were secured for that building operation. So to see this was disappointing, to say the least. I want to bring that to the attention of this committee. And I hope, your presence, I know you just newly established, will help make sure we don't do this again. Yeah. So that's the short of it. Nothing else.
Okay, I appreciate that, John.
Thanks.
That's
Yeah. All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks for everything you do. And if I stop doing some other things, maybe I could help out more formally.
Awesome.
Yeah. Okay. Have a nice meeting.
Thanks for coming down.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay. Madam Clerk, are there any members of the public on Zoom?
No.
Yeah. So with that, at this time, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes for our March 27, 2025 regular meeting.
I move that we approve the minutes as written for March 27th, 2025.
I'll
Okay,
second.
moved by Preston, second by Paige. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Minutes are approved as presented. Go on to old business. We're going to discuss and recommend 2 varieties of trees to plant in the downtown parking lot. And with that, I turn the floor over to staff.
Thank you, Chase. Bear with me 1 second while I pull up our drawings so we can all make sure we're talking about the same thing. Okay. Now, can everyone see that?
Mhm.
All right. Yeah. So this is the bid set construction drawing, and what is a little bit different that is not reflected in this drawing is the two new tree wells that we're adding in the kind of center west where my cursor is circling in the southwest corner of the lot here. Those are going to be larger than depicted currently. I worked with the contractor over the last few days to enlarge those areas while not losing any additional parking spaces or having impact on the flow or function of the parking lot. This one's going to be just slightly enlarged. This area, the parallelogram's kind of hashed out for the future controlled parking, and we're uncertain what that will ultimately be right now. So we're just trying to make sure we leave plenty of room for that so we don't have to, remove something that we just installed. So we're being pretty cautious on that one. On this one, this island will be enlarged quite a bit. These hash marks where they kind of make up the triangle in this portion will make up the tree well primarily, in addition to the area that is currently shown. Apologies, I don't have an updated drawing here. We were kind of working this out in the field yesterday, so the contractor is getting it staked today, and they'll be forming this curb, these areas next week. So we'll be installing curb around all of them, so we'll minimize future wheel travel, damaging the root zones and, compacting soil and all those other concerns. So pretty excited about that. These contractors are doing just an amazing job. If you've been over there in the last week, they got everything stripped, demolished in about a day and a half and started getting down to subgrade, and now they're building everything back up. So it's changing in a hurry, and they're doing a really fantastic job. As an aside, just to give a little bit of background here, the trees that we maintained, the spruces on the north side, the maple in the kind of center east, and then the cedars on the southeast corner of the lot. When they removed all the asphalt, thankfully, we did not find a big cluster of roots right under the asphalt like I hoped. I was glad to be wrong about that, because it would have really complicated protection and, maintaining those trees throughout construction. So the few they did find were the two spruces on the north side, and the roots that were exposed were relatively minor in nature, nothing really of concern. So everything's looking really good on the project so far. I'm really positive about that. With that said, we've got two trees to decide upon here. So if anyone's given us some thought, I've got some ideas in mind, but I'll kind of defer to you all, and we can discuss from there.
Kind of my initial thought was having a softwood and a hardwood, just for the sake of mixing it up.
Sure.
I mean, we can,
Any species in mind that you're thinking of, or?
thinking either a, western larch or a western white pine, I guess would be, my top two preferences for a softwood. And a hardwood, probably shouldn't be an acer species, so.
Nope, or an ash.
Yeah.
I like the idea of a conifer down on that southwest corner to to kind of balance the conifers in the north and in the southeast. So the western white pine or the larch is going to drop a lot of needles, of course, all the end of the. But
The trade-off is that the cones are small. And they don't show. So.
and the western white pine's the state tree, so we could go that way too.
As far as longevity in a tough environment for trees, obviously any species is gonna struggle, and not be what it would be in a ideal scenario in a field in the, in a protected area compared to a parking lot. Of those two, which one are we thinking is gonna have a better shot of maturity and vigor and growth.
I have more ideas if
Please.
you wanna add like a whole list and then discuss the merits of everything.
Sure.
I have some to,
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you continue.
oh, well, I like the Amelanchier, or the serviceberry. I know that you got the little fruits and that might be a problem, but I was thinking, that autumn brilliance or whatever, is a beautiful tree. A small tree, and I have grown the Perosia, the Persian Perosia before in home landscaping. I don't know if that would work. I don't know how well it works in a, around asphalt and stuff. And then the other one I was thinking of was the linden. I don't know how well linden would do in that case, but they're beautiful trees too.
Linden
I like
is on my
lindens.
list. Linden's a good, tough
Yeah.
urban tree.
And
Yeah.
we do have a fair number throughout town in, kind of narrow excuse me, tree lawns and, locations where they're not really ideally planted. But they've been survivors for 50 years and they're big and
Right.
looking really healthy. So I'm not super concerned about that species there. I think they're a tough tree. And if you get them through the first few years, I think they're gonna be fine. The first few years, of course, is a struggle with anything we plant, but
Absolutely.
great.
Those are just three that I have preferences for, but.
I like the idea of the Western Larch. I think it really kind of highlights what's great about this area. I feel like so many municipalities are just covered in deciduous species, and really, I mean, Sandpoint, this is a coniferous area, and the larch, they're just beautiful really throughout the year, the changing colors. Yeah, the small cones, that's another benefit, but that would be, my suggestion would be 2 Western Larch.
They're about as disease resistant and disease hardy as any conifer gets.
Mhm.
Usually
And they
deep
can get
rooted.
They love sun.
the biggest-
Yeah. And we're prioritizing larch and ponderosas in some of our watershed property because of their resistance to, some of the pests that are going around and their strength and, longevity over the years. So they're also one of my favorite trees as a personal note, not that that's a deciding factor, but I fully support a larch in this location. And Preston, I like the point you made of kind of conifers on all 4 corners. And we have the maple that we saved in the middle on the, eastern, and if we do a deciduous kind of opposite,
Yeah.
that does balance the lot really well. That's a good way to think about it. What are your options, Paige?
They're all good ideas. It's hard when you're talking trees to decide on only 2, right? I have ideas too. So ginkgo is a really tough urban tree and there's not a lot of them. Ginkgo biloba, it gets pretty big. There are different cultivars, so you can kind of choose what mature height you want. They get beautiful fall color, so really yellow in the fall. It's known to do well in tough urban scenarios. There's some at the what's it called? The big brick building downtown, the Sandpoint Center. Is that the name for it? I don't think that's the right name for the building. It's the big red brick building that's like 3 stories tall with the bank in it and Tango Cafe.
Oh, yeah.
Their parking lot has some ginkgos on the south side. But other than that, I don't really see many ginkgos in Sandpoint, so it would really be a good diversification of what we do have. So I really favor that one. It's just a beautiful tree. Silver linden was on my list. Yeah, there's quite a few lindens around town, but not nearly as many as other, all the maples we're talking about and things. So I think it's still good diversification and it's a really good tough urban tree. So I think it would do well if, we're talking about high heat in the parking lot. I think it would do well there too. The other thing that comes to mind is the bald cypress. I don't know if you guys may not be, is anyone not familiar with the bald cypress? It's a deciduous conifer, like the tamarack, and so it has needles, but it loses those needles in the winter. And one thing I think about when I'm thinking about urban trees in a setting where there's lots of cars like parking or driving is the shade that gets cast by a tree that has its needles year round can actually create like ice patches for people to slip and fall on. And this is a parking lot. So as much as I love the idea of all conifers or more conifers, it's one thing to think about on the side where there's going to be shade throughout the day. Is that going to create a problem, a physical logistical problem? And would it be better to have more trees with, deciduous leaves or needles that fall off? So I would favor, if we're gonna, with a conifer, either the tamarack or the bald cypress. Bald cypress, there is one by the visitor center. You guys are familiar, there's like one tree by the visitor center that's kind of out front all by itself.
Okay.
And they're a really tough tree. They can put up with like being in standing water for a period of time, which most trees can't. They form those root nodules that pop up so they can get oxygen. They can also withstand dry though. So they're like a really interesting underplanted, tough urban tree. So that's another idea I had. Kentucky coffee tree is a really bulletproof. It's a deciduous tree that has like a nice big canopy. All the trees on my list are pretty big because in my mind, I'm thinking, wow, this is prime real estate for putting in a big tree because we don't have power line conflicts, especially the center tree. The one on the edge, might cascade over. There's another street tree right there. So I don't know if we want like a huge spreading canopy there, but in the middle, we could do something like quite large. And on the end, I was thinking something more single, like central leader, more like conical, like a tall. And so that's a lot of information to process, but so I have some oaks on my list too, because an oak would be like a really beautiful, huge spreading canopy that would cast a lot of shade. The downside of oaks is the acorns. But there's a downside to every tree. So I don't know. So I had bur oak and the swamp white oak on my list. Yeah. So does that resonate with anybody else about putting like big trees in this space because it's prime real estate with no power line conflicts and the shade that they would create for parking? Does that make sense to anybody?
Yeah, I think we should take full advantage of the fact that we don't have any overhead obstructions to work around.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can put, we could put the biggest species around in either of these locations and not really have a concern, into the future, which is pretty cool. There's a lot of locations where we've got overhead lines or other obstructions where we have to be choosing smaller species. If we, I kind of have two schools of thought. One is, all deciduous, or two deciduous, all entirely due to their shade potential as they mature. Parking lot is hot in July when it's 90 degrees, and the more shade we get, the better. With that said, I think there's a lot of merit to having, a conifer on each corner, for consistency and, kind of aesthetics of continuity. I think the ginkgo is a great option. The coffee tree is a great option. All the options we've thrown out, you guys have thrown out are great choices. I'm looking through our tree inventory as you were talking, Paige, and our tree inventory says there's 3 ginkgos in town, and it's not really cooperating, so it's not telling me exactly where they are. I'll have to look at it
I think they're by the same.
a little bit later and it might be those 3. There's one showing kind of over here, but I'm wondering whether or not it's actually over there. So I'll have to check when the inventory decides it wants to cooperate. And if there's ones beyond those 3, because I think a ginkgo is a really nice tree as well. And I've seen them in a lot of parking lots in the eastern US, and they do really well
Yeah, they don't
in that
have
scenario.
pest or disease issues either.
Yeah, and they take a beating.
And they
you
can
know?
take heat for
Yeah.
sure, because in Yakima Valley, I've seen them planted around parking lots. and
Yeah.
they do well.
Coffee trees are a really neat tree, and I don't know that we have any in town.
I don't think we do.
Maybe a couple, but I wonder if they're commercially available in this area.
So that I don't know, but could find out pretty easily. If we decide to select it, you know, there's a lot of places that will ship bare root trees too.
Sure.
So I don't think sourcing it would be that big of a deal. It would be cool to add something we don't really have, you know, diversify. And then people see it and they're like, what's that? And then they want to go plant it because, you know, they see it.
How are those size at maturity, both the
Let
the
me
ginkgo and the coffee tree?
tell you, just one sec. There's a really good site that I trust a lot. It's the Missouri Botanical Garden Plant Finder. They seem to be very accurate, so.
That's what I use as well.
Oh, yeah.
It's a great resource. I've been using it for like 15 years and they keep it up and, you know, if a new pest or insect or whatever comes out, they build it into it right away. So you know, it's a, you know, species of concern. If
Yeah.
it's something that's taken out, it's a great resource.
Is that the Kentucky coffee tree?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it says 50 to 65 feet, spread 40 to 50.
Yeah, so it's good size.
Yeah.
And the ginkgo I just pulled up, so 50 to 80 feet. Again, it depends on the cultivar. I think the autumn gold is the tall one. I would recommend a big one, like whatever the biggest cultivar is. And then the spread on the ginkgo is 30 to 40 feet. They're they're not like a big rounded, they're kind of a tall columnar canopy. Full sun. Yeah. So that's roughly the size of the ginkgo.
Looks cool. They're a really cool tree. A lot of folks, if you haven't seen or if somebody hasn't told you what a ginkgo is before, when you walk up and see it, you're like, what is this?
Yeah.
Because the leaves are unique to any other
Yeah,
tree I've
yeah.
ever seen.
They're ancient. They're
Yeah.
really an ancient tree and they come in male and female.
Yeah.
Yes,
So-
we would need to make sure we get the male, because they smell pretty bad to get the
Yep.
female.
And one thing I've learned about ginkgos over the years, I've planted a bunch of them when I worked in the eastern half of the US. They're a college professor I had, a horticulture professor, described them as having an ugly duckling phase. And at the time, I didn't really understand what he meant. And then I started doing it, you know, professionally in the field. And when they're young, they can look a little leggy. They can look a little weird. Their branch pattern, the way they grow is it takes them a few years to kind of mature and look like a normal tree. That's not a concern to me at all. From the public side, if you're not familiar with this particular tree and how trees grow and mature, that could be something that some folks are like, hey, why'd you guys put that, you know, ugly tree? Right. But with that said, that's a great species that has a lot of resiliency in an environment like this. And if we only have 3 of them in town, even if there is a pest or insect in the future, it's unlikely to be a major concern for us in Sandpoint.
There is another one. I planted one at the library last year, 2 years ago.
Really?
There's one more ginkgo. It's still small, but
Cool.
just so you know.
Is that listed in the urban forestry management plan, the ginkgo?
I believe it is.
Okay, I couldn't find it. I found the coffee tree, but the ginkgo.
So I guess it depends on if we want the conifer on the corner or not. I was thinking well, it sounds like we have a lot of support of ginkgo, so if we want ginkgo, that could be the center tree and conifer on the corner. But if we didn't want to do the conifer, if we wanted like big spreading canopy like in the middle, then the ginkgo would be a good one for the corner. I feel like, so you could go either way on that.
Well, I wrote down, I think I missed a couple, but I wrote down 7 species as you all were presenting. Maybe we've got 8 or 9. We could kind of pare down the list to 4 or 5 and go from there, or determine, do we want a conifer and a deciduous tree, you know, one of each. If we want to do that, that can pare down our list further and then continue to discuss.
Yeah, we could just vote on that first, and then it's easier to pick the species if we know we want one of them to be a conifer.
I suppose I would lean towards the conifer on that southwest and go with the large. I mean, a beautiful stately tree, you know, colors fantastic, you know. It's a native. So that's.
I'm hearing, larch coming from, your comments too. So, I mean, I'd be completely in favor of a larch on that corner. That'd be the southwest corner. And then we pick, well, this is a good problem to have. We've had a lot of great choices.
Absolutely.
Deciduous to go in the middle there.
And I fully support a larch in the southwest corner if that's the direction the commission would like to go.
Sounds pretty good.
We got bald cypress, ginkgo, coffee tree, silver linden, bur oak, and swamp oak. That's what I wrote down in discussion.
Those are all great choices. The bur oak, I have had experience in a ideal environment, and this is when they're 60+ years old, so it's not a concern for a number of years. But I've seen acorns the size of softballs on bur oaks,
That's big.
primarily in Kentucky and Southeast Ohio. That's like an environment that they just absolutely thrive in. So I think it's an amazing tree. I come at it with a bit of caution because I don't want to plant it and have this thing get big and beautiful, and then 60 years from now, it's denting hoods and roofs of cars. But with that said, the swamp oak is a great choice, and there's also lots of other oak species. So if we want to consider an oak further, I'm fully supportive of that. And perhaps there's a variety of the bur oak that is a non-fruiting variety or a lower fruiting variety. I'm not sure. I've never looked into that.
No, the one that I had researched said it got up to 1.5-inch long acorns, which that's, we don't want to dent anybody's vehicles. That's why I said it with like a word of caution. But the size of softballs, that's, man.
I had some photos of it at a time, and I know exactly where one is. If it's still there and I can find it on Street View, I might be able to like send a photo around because it's pretty impressive. It's quite a specimen. And if I recall, that was probably 15+ years ago that I saw that tree. It was probably 48 inches DBH at the time. Not that it's probably grown that much in 15 years, but it was a big tree.
Since we're seemingly kind of looking at tiebreakers, should we just eliminate the oak right off the bat and just maybe keep one of those in our hip pocket for another project?
Yeah, that seems like a good idea.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Maybe we all throw out our top pick and see if there's a majority for the deciduous tree.
I'm kind of torn between a silver linden and the ginkgo.
I think I'm leaning towards ginkgo myself.
I like the linden, but I'd go with the ginkgo too, you know.
Yeah, I would say I like the lindens, ginkgos I'm not super familiar with, so yeah.
I think they're both fantastic trees. We do have more lindens in town and 3-ish, maybe 4 ginkgos.
Yeah.
So from that respect, I kind of lean towards ginkgo, but I'm perfectly happy with either of those species.
I get that, yeah.
Was there an issue with the coffee tree that you suggested?
I don't know of any issues with the coffee tree, just maybe sourcing it, like Eric said. I think we can probably figure that part out if we need to. But there aren't, that we know of, any coffee trees in Sandpoint, so that would, that'd be kind of
Pretty
cool
Okay,
to,
yeah.
yeah, you look at the coffee tree again. That's one that I'm less familiar with. I'm pretty familiar with ginkgos. I've dealt with them a lot, but
Oh, yeah. Page 108. Right. It took me a second to find it too.
Yeah.
It's actually, the ginkgo is classified as a class 2 tree in our
Okay.
management plan. I would have thought it would be a class 3.
What's the difference between the classes? What's that?
Class 1 is the smallest, class 3 is
Oh.
the largest.
Oh, okay. Got it.
What's the coffee tree classified as?
I just saw it. I think it's a class 2 as well.
I think so too. I think I saw it in here.
Oh, it's a legume. Looks like it's got pods. Got pea pods.
Yeah, it does have pods. Zone,
No, it is class 3, actually.
the coffee tree?
It is.
Oh, yeah, because this is 60 to 80 feet. I guess it just depends on, because the ginkgo also got to 80 feet, so maybe it's the spread that makes it larger. Is that how they're classified, not so much height?
I think it's a little bit of both. So the height and spread in the urban forestry management plan for Kentucky coffee tree, 50 to 65 feet in height, 40 to 50 foot spread. And for the ginkgo, 40 to 55 feet height, 15 to 35 foot spread.
So the coffee tree spread is a little bigger spread.
Little wider.
Yeah, a little wider. Now that'd be more shade, but
That would be more shade. I mean, I'm in favor of big tree, more shade.
As big as we can get out
Yeah.
there is great.
I was gonna suggest a tulip tree, because those things are monsters, but also, they grow really fast, so they have like a weak wooded tendency. I don't know if any of you have experience with a large tulip tree. Do any of you know?
Seen a couple.
I've seen a couple like in Seattle, but I don't know management wise.
I've cleaned a few that have broken in ice storms,
Yeah, okay,
and they're exactly as you described.
Yeah.
Fast growing, large, beautiful trees, but they can
maybe not.
have some weaker wood
Yeah.
compared to others.
Yeah, darn.
I think we want strong,
Yeah, we want them pretty
Yeah.
strong.
Yeah,
don't want.
and I will say that coffee tree is known in parts of the Midwest and East as a really great woodworking tree. For high wear items that people might make, a trunk,
Yeah,
you know, things like that, like cabinet faces, they use it a lot for things like that, so that's a really tough species,
okay,
and they're awesome, fantastic cherries when they're
Yeah.
growing.
Nice.
tough choice.
Should we put any merit on the optics of the ginkgo being, kind of sorry looking in the early years, or is that not something we should be concerned with? Just commission member thoughts.
Not worried about it, because it's just the early days. This tree could be around such a long time. And it'd be easy to educate people about it and put like a tiny little plaque that's like, oh, this looks like this for this many years and it becomes this majestic thing. Like education, a little sign would go a long ways towards something like that.
In last month's meeting, when we were talking about location and date for our Arbor Day event, which is item 4 in today's meeting, Chair Dunkel mentioned that perhaps one of these 2 trees is our tree that we dedicate in our Arbor Day celebration, and I thought that was a really great idea. If we selected the ginkgo or the coffee tree or something like that, maybe we dedicate that. And to your point, when we're planting that tree, we have a educational signage that we install at the same time that kind of talks about a ginkgo, and you may not have seen one before because we only have a few in town, but here's what it does and here's what to expect, kind of things.
Cool.
Yeah, I like that idea.
Great.
It's a great idea.
Yeah.
And if people see that tree, they're gonna be really excited and want to plant them. They're gonna see the fan-shaped leaves and be like, oh, it's like a prehistoric tree. How exciting. Where do I get one? And they do have these trees for sale on the Arbor Day Foundation, so you can get bare root. I just got 3 of them for fairly inexpensive too. So you can source these a lot less expensively than a place like New Leaf. I just think people would be excited and want to put them in their yards if they see an example of one in town, like in such a prominent location.
If we select the coffee tree or the ginkgo, unless we know that we can get either of those locally, we might want to have a second choice. If we find they're unavailable locally, and maybe, you know, if the ginkgo's selected, the coffee tree is a second choice or vice versa. And we can likely get one of them. We may not be able to get either.
What size are you thinking of, for planting nursery stock?
As big as we can reasonably get.
Okay. Okay.
And not be irresponsible with it. And irresponsible meaning, you know, getting a tree that's too large that isn't gonna transplant well.
Right.
Is what I mean.
I have found that the smaller trees do way better. People are always like, I want the biggest tree I can get right now, and the smaller tree will almost always catch the bigger tree and then surpass it. And the reason for that is because they're container grown. They get the spiraling, girdling roots in the pot because it's just not natural for a root to hit a pot. And then what does it do? It goes in a circle. And so it's super important during planting, if we were to get a larger tree, that we have to do it correctly. We have to cut those roots rather than just try to like spread them out, because they'll just keep going in that circle. And then you don't see that tree death until 10, 12, 15 years later, and you've lost all that time. So smaller, in my mind, smaller is better, but not tiny, because if we're dedicating a tree for the city, if it's this tall, it's going to be a little silly looking. For my plantings, I do bare root, like small trees, but I think something, you know, intermediate for what we're doing, but not huge, because we want it to succeed.
That's a great point, Paige, and I've heard that as well. I haven't actually witnessed it, and, you know, planting a larger and a medium size over a period of years and then monitoring them. I guess to define what I was referencing as a larger tree, I was thinking something about 1.5 inch caliper, something like that. I'm happy to, you know, change course, but that's typically about the size trees we can get locally. And, you know, I see, if we were to, select one of those species and, whether it's B and B or in a pot, and we find that the roots are, you know, kind of on their way to girdling, that's also a good way to, you know, show our folks who might be there that day what to do, and, you know, how to handle that situation to give your tree the best chance for success. And we do have the resources here to plant that properly, regardless of what we find when we pull it out of the pot or the burlap.
Yeah.
But
Cool, that's good. I know they do have ginkgos down at New Leaf.
oh, do they?
They almost always have like 3 different cultivars of ginkgos down there.
Cool.
Yeah.
So it kind of sounds like we're honing in on a western larch and either a ginkgo or a coffee tree with one or the other as an alternate due to a wild card with availability.
Yeah, sounds good.
And I like the idea of doing a planting demonstration, you know, teaching people. On a side note, I'm doing a planting class tomorrow at the YMCA and at the library on Saturday. So if any of you want to come see the roots of a tree and how to tear them up and cut them apart properly, come. Yeah. Sorry.
Hopefully you have a good turnout.
We'll see. Yeah, hopefully.
It's at the library, so that helps.
Yeah.
It was good.
Excellent. I think those are great choices. If the commission's ready to take a vote, feel free. If we need to keep discussing.
Well, if anyone's ready to put a motion on the table, I mean, we can always discuss that before we roll into a vote.
Yeah, I would propose that we plant the larch on the corner location and the ginkgo in the middle location. With, I guess, a backup plan of if we can't source good nursery stock of those 2 items, we would do the Kentucky coffee tree. But I think that one will be harder to source than those 2.
So it's been moved to plant a larch and a ginkgo with the coffee tree as an alternate. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, second by Jeff. Any further discussion on that? Okay,
Good choice.
all those in favor say aye.
I
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. that. Our next item of business is to continue discussion of categories and definitions for heritage and other valuable trees in Sandpoint. Staff, you wanna lead us off here?
Sure. I don't have too much in particular on this item to kind of bring up or display, but last month, Mr. Andrews had a couple of categories that we were kind of discussing and kicking around that were, you know, additional classifications to trees. They were, I think, very similar to the ones that Paige presented in January with a couple minor differences, but I think with the way we left this item last month was everybody kind of look into it a little bit and see if you found any other additional categories or reasons to move in this direction or that direction. Did anybody find anything? I did some digging myself and kind of found the similar categories to what the both of you had presented. And as I was thinking about it more, I think having additional categories is fantastic. I also kind of think we need a larger overall definition with smaller categories within it, meaning we define maybe it's heritage tree as the overall category of, you know, trees of note in Sandpoint. Or a different term. It doesn't need to be heritage tree, but that is the term that's identified in our comprehensive plan that city council's adopted. But it could be that, or it could be a different one. And then the additional kind of categories below it of classifying different trees. I think there's a lot of merit to that, but I also think having a kind of defined definition on the top of, you know, trees of note, and whatever that term is fine with me. And then we further define additional things below. And what I'm thinking is, you know, the difference between a tree that has historical significance in town versus a tree that is, you know, a specimen of its species versus a tree that has perhaps cultural significance. You know, there's those sort of classifications. I'd hate to lump them all together because a historical tree is not necessarily a specimen tree or vice versa. So I like having additional categories below that. But with that said, I'll turn it over to you all if there's other discussion points or things we should talk about here.
I don't know if you guys saw, I had created like a 2-page document and shared it to the drive, our shared drive, which by the way, I need help finding.
Yeah, I did
can't
too.
find the drive.
Yeah, I can't either. I don't know where it is.
But anyway, just the meat of it. I said defining distinguished trees as heritage, so we could use, there's a lot of language you could use. A heritage tree is a tree or several trees in a group that is set apart from other trees due to the special value it adds to the community. The criteria for heritage trees is quite varied and may be distinguished by one or more of the following. And that's where I listed the specific. So it could just be one, or it could be several of these. And this is what I came up with, but of course we can add or subtract whatever everyone thinks. Size, so sheer size can be a really valuable tree. The age of a tree, sometimes old trees are very distinguished. The species, so maybe we have one Kentucky coffee tree in all of Sandpoint and that makes it special. Obviously cultural significance, the aesthetic. Sometimes a tree is just so beautiful that sets it apart from everything else. Ecological value, or historical context. So those are the categories that came to mind for me. But I think that's kind of what you were getting at, Eric, is like, here's a statement about heritage trees or whatever we decide to call them. And then here's several different items that could qualify them as this definition.
Right. And I think what that allows us to do is to capture some individual trees that may not fall under other definitions, you know, so if it's a tree that's a slower growing species, but it's been in town for 100 years and has historical significance in town, but it's only 15 inches DBH or something like that. It wouldn't fall under the, specimen tree or some of the other categories that are kind of based on size, but that doesn't mean it's any less important. So defining some of those, I think will help us make sure we're giving trees that kind of deserve that recognition, a place to be recognized. And I say this with the kind of context of whatever these definitions land on. I think in our January or December meeting, I mentioned that we have an old pamphlet, that, Outstanding Trees of Sandpoint pamphlet that was printed in 2008-ish. And some of those trees aren't around anymore, but many of them are. And whatever our final definition is, I think an update of that pamphlet would be excellent. Because there's a bunch of those that we could, have in a new version of it, and there's probably a whole bunch of additional trees around town that deserve consideration for inclusion in that. So that'll help us like kind of tell that story of specimens and historical and cultural and all the other cool stuff in town.
It would be cool to call the public's attention to that project when we get to that point, because there's trees I don't know about or you don't know about that somebody knew about 8 years ago that's important to somebody here. So it'd be cool to grab all of that information when we do decide to do that project.
Absolutely. And I think there's a number of trees that were included in the original pamphlet that are on private property. And I would love to include them again, but I also don't really want to include trees on private property without the kind of sign off from the landowner. If that's something that we're going to have at City Hall and folks are going to come in and grab and go do their scavenger hunt to find all those trees. If we don't, if a property owner doesn't want visitors coming by and staring at their tree, we probably shouldn't include it. But there's also, I'm sure, lots of others that have a really, significant tree on their property that would welcome that. So I think that's a, great thing to kind of reach out to those folks or have them reach out to us, a little bit of both. And, let us know if they would like or would not like that included.
And if I recall in that Outstanding Trees manual, there was one dedicated, it was a gooby tree, kind of on the edge of city limits there on Gooby Road. Is it a willow? I think it's a willow. Yeah,
Off Great Northern.
yeah.
I think I know which tree you're talking
Yeah.
about.
Just right past the railroad tracks on Gooby.
Yeah.
Right when you Y off Great Northern, yeah.
Do we need to kind of define some of those definitions or settle on the 5 terms we're going to use under heritage trees or other classification? Or do we want to keep doing a little bit more research before we come up with a final on those?
Well, I like the historical cultural designation and a specimen tree and maybe a rare. I mean, those are, maybe you could add, I don't know about one more, but in that, I still like the idea of a grove, significant grove of trees that would acknowledge that this, like Lakeview Park or Farmer Park or things like that. Maybe there's others.
Like a collection of trees.
Yeah, collection of trees, and there could be a heritage tree designated within that grove, but the whole grove stands as a heritage grove.
I think that's a great idea. I'm thinking of Pine Street Park right across the street here. We've got dozen plus of, mature ponderosas, western whites. I think there's a couple larches in there.
Lakeview Park for sure.
Yeah, and I don't know that any of those would meet any of those classifications on their own, but to your point, like that grove over there, I would categorize as significant to be included in that. I don't have my screen shared anymore. I've got the Outstanding Trees document pulled up here. We could kind of look through if that would be helpful.
So we don't currently have a heritage tree designation. am I?
We have a heritage tree definition in our city comprehensive plan.
Okay,
But it is a two-sentence definition.
and,
It needs further refinement.
and are any of these notable trees, are they officially considered by code to be special in any way, like heritage, or is this just a group of trees people walked around and said, this is notable, that's, or is it codified, in other words?
I believe there is note in our city code about heritage trees. I'd have to double check that. I believe there is, but I don't think that definition is very encompassing.
Okay.
I don't, and to answer another part of your question, I don't know how the trees that are in the current outstanding trees manual were defined. So I don't know if it was a group that walked around and decided at the time, or if they kind of did a call for, hey, do you have an interesting tree kind of thing? I'm not sure.
Right.
Kind of strikes me more as a citizen, type exploratory document.
There was the tree committee before, and they may have initiated this. In fact, I know Bob Wilson very well. He was the chair of the tree committee. I could ask him.
They're acknowledged on this, I'm pretty sure.
They are,
Yeah, it might be great to reach out to
and
him.
and to see, yeah. And, I took my example from the city of Tumwater, which has codified their heritage tree in city code, and it has to go through an application process. And so there's the applicant, and not the person who nominates the tree, and then the landowner has to sign off on it as well as being considered a heritage tree. And then, but it does then not quite restrict how that tree is dealt with in the future, but it does have some. You have to go through the city in order to do any, anything drastic like cut it down.
Sure.
Yeah.
It would offer certain protections.
Yeah. So it's codified in Tumwater's, city code. And I don't know if the city wants to go that far.
And I think that is up for discussion, and obviously we could, the commission could make recommendations to city council, and they could, take that from there. I think there's merit to having something defined, meaning, a process, and I don't think we should just be throwing whatever definitions we decide on out on trees without some sort of process, defining that. So we should have kind of baselines for what these categories are, what makes a tree fall into one of these categories or not. So it is a little bit black and white, but obviously, much of that will be, isn't necessarily quantifiable. Specimen trees can be, and things related to size can be. Some of the other categories are, maybe a little bit more nuanced than that. And this is the third page of the outstanding trees manual. It has the species on the kind of left-hand side here, and we do have a pretty good number of different types and species that are on the older list.
Okay.
I liked what you were saying about it being codified though, because our committee is like doing stuff now and it's great, but like, what about next year or 5 years from now? Is this committee still existing? And if not, the city code most certainly will be. So I think it would be valuable to think about adding it to city code at some point once we decide what makes sense to us.
So to kind of lay out that process a little bit, if the commission determines the heritage tree definition and what other, specimen, historical, cultural, grove, and additional categories we may decide upon, we should define those, have it, written. We can all kind of develop those definitions as a group, and then we can draft them and kind of get it on a city council agenda. And once we've finalized that, get it on a city council agenda and request city council to include this in a future city code amendment for the kind of in the urban forestry section. And then city council would, make the ultimate determination on whether or not they thought that was appropriate. But that would kind of be the ideal process. So if we define, and then we could, present to city council and go from there.
I just wanted to jump in really quick because the Sandpoint does have a city ordinance relating to heritage trees. It's chapter 7-15-13. It just says protection of public and private historic and heritage trees. The historic and heritage tree preservation designation recognizes the significance of trees in the city. A tree may be retained beyond its useful life because of its contribution to the environment and city character. A heritage or historical tree may be designated by the tree committee in coordination with the Historic Preservation Committee based on the criteria as described in the Arboricultural Manual. And I think it's totally appropriate if you have some changes you want to make to that language. I think the city council would be open to that.
Can you say that what section that was in again?
It was 15-13.
7-15-13.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah, there you go.
So can everyone see that?
Yeah.
That's I forgot that was included in our code. Thank you for that, Kyle. So what this tells me is, I think the last line in here is most important: in coordination with the Historic Preservation Committee based on the criteria as described in the Arboricultural Manual. So we can define those definitions, and that could be included in the update of the Arboricultural Manual, which is our second last item up for discussion today. And then, when city council is considering adoption of the update of that manual, these definitions will be included.
So this is our blueprint to work with, really, or to expand off of.
Yep.
That'd be how I'd see it, yeah.
So it's citing the arboricultural manual, but where in the manual does it talk about heritage trees?
It has,
Just don't see it. There's protection and preservation of public trees. Maybe it's there.
I don't know that the Arboriculture Manual defines heritage tree, because this manual predates likely a council adopted definition of heritage tree, which gives us additional reason to have that manual updated.
Do we want to loop back to that since we have an agenda item specifically for discussion of the Arboricultural Manual?
Sure, we can do that.
Just try to be respectful of everyone's time, and we try to meet our 4:30 PM adjournment.
Absolutely.
Good. We don't have this particular discussion is just listed as a discussion. We don't have to take any action on the heritage definition today. So we were looking at historical significance, cultural significance, specimen tree, and groves to possibly hone in on definitions to kind of piggyback off of the overall heritage tree.
And if I recall correctly, Preston, last month you were you had thrown out kind of specimen tree, and Paige, I believe I just pulled up your the document you prepared that was on a repository, and this one that I highlighted, champion. I think champion and specimen are kind of synonyms, is what we were talking about last month. I don't have a strong opinion whether it's defined as champion or specimen. I think the point is we have a definition for trees of that, that have those characteristics.
And to clarify this too, I think I should probably revisit it, and it might be a little bit misleading, but this is how this topic was presented to me, you know, it's basically the life phases of a tree. It goes from being a seedling to mature to notable to all these things. And I stuck heritage in there, but any of these life phases could be defined as a heritage tree. A heritage tree is just notable for some reason, so I just wanted to clarify that, so it's not confusing. The way I put it in here, I would like to revisit that, so it doesn't appear to be confusing.
Sure. So with those categories, specimen slash champion, historical and cultural, grove. And there was an additional one that you said, Chase, that I
What did I,
missed.
Was it rare or,
Rare could definitely be one.
okay.
Species was one.
Are we all kind of generally in alignment that those are good categories to have? Those 4 or 5?
Do size and age then go into like the champion or specimen category? Cause I didn't hear you say size or age. Is that on your list?
I think they could.
Okay.
Are you thinking they need to be a separate category?
I mean, is there any merit to like limiting the number of categories? I don't really see a point in having fewer categories. It just gives us more options to say this is a special tree because that's.
at some point, there's gonna be bleed over. I think
Yeah,
if we,
yeah.
if we dilute it too much,
I guess I see size and age as being
standalone.
more explicit than saying something like champion. It's like, what does champion mean?
Yeah.
Unless we define it.
And to that end, you know, depending on the species, there's, you know, a smaller species tree could be a specimen tree or a champion tree, but not be of great size as well.
Yeah.
So
Right.
I think it's important we don't kick trees out, you know, set definitions up to unintentionally kick trees out of being considered under one of these definitions because they don't meet a size requirement, you know,
Yeah.
because they're a smaller species or something like that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I was just saying size and age should be their own categories. I think, because I guess if you do put size and age under the umbrella of champion, then that problem you're discussing is a real problem.
Sure. Okay, so I've got 5 written down here. We can just kind of move on for now, I think, and as we are discussing some of the other items, keep kind of circling back around to this.
Sounds good.
Excellent.
Okay, so the next agenda item is a discussion, and this will be an action item on the location and date for the Arbor Day event. And in the previous meeting, I know that we'd kicked around May 31st and June 7th, and with Farman Park and Lakeview Park as being possible locations or split locations. Does that ring a bell?
Yep, those are the dates I had written down that we were discussing as well. I will say that I'm gonna be out at a Idaho Department of Lands meeting from the 3rd to the 6th. I'll be back by the 7th, but there may be you know, kind of last minute items that need to be taken care of that I won't be around for. So that 7th may not be the best date for me. I certainly would be available to be there, just maybe some of the last minute planning things I may not be able to take care of that week. But the 31st works for me. Or if anybody wanted to propose a different date.
So you were talking about a celebration at these parks, but then also a dedication at the parking lot for planting a tree?
Yeah,
Separately?
what we were discussing last month was a couple different options. Doing a celebration at Lakeview Park because it's, you know, has some fantastic trees at it, and Preston has as a member of the
Native Plant Society.
Native Plant Society, they've developed a pretty awesome master plan for that location. So that's a good spot to hold it just for, you know, the location and setting. Farman's is a good spot to hold it if we're gonna dedicate one of the downtown parking lot trees, because it's right across the street. Of course, we could do it in the downtown parking lot as well. Or, you know, in a corner of the downtown parking lot. It doesn't really have shade or some of those other things that make it a nice space, but the end of May is unlikely to be 90 degrees, so maybe that's not too big of a deal. But perhaps we could dedicate the tree at the downtown parking lot and host the event at Farman. And, you know, direct folks to that if they'd like to see it. That's an option.
Yeah, I was, what I was thinking was in conjunction with farmer's market, you could easily make an announcement and get lots of people attention about it.
Yeah.
And then you could direct them over to the parking lot, which is just a, you know, short walk and,
Yeah.
and do the planting there and dedication.
I like that.
Yeah.
And you get a lot of exposure that way. That would be, I think, really valuable.
How about the date, May 31st?
Sounds like
So
a good
Saturday.
day. Gives plenty of time to source the trees. Yeah.
What time of day? Because there are the farmers markets on Saturdays at Farming Park.
Yeah, and I would like to reach out to the farmer's market and see if we could, you know, do our event without impacting their operation too much. Like I would like to, you know, just carve out a little corner to have our booth and whatnot set up. But I don't want to interrupt their operations either. So if I can reach out to them and if they're amenable to that, maybe we could, you know, what farmer's market starts at 9 on Saturdays.
Yes.
Maybe we could just do the event starting at 9 if they were amenable to that. If not, maybe we could do it towards the end of the farmer's market that day, so they're, you know, we're not interrupting their operations, but. Are we good with the 31st? If so, I can reach out to the farmer's market and see what their thoughts are on an event that day.
Yeah, and they do block off Oak between, what is it, second and third, or actually third and
Third and
fourth.
fourth, yeah.
Yeah, they do.
Seems like there should be space to accommodate.
Yeah.
They'd probably let us do an announcement on stage too, say, okay, we're heading over here to
Yeah.
dedicate this tree.
Yeah.
Come join us.
That'd be fantastic.
That
That would get a much larger crowd if we could just get the mic for 1 minute.
Yeah. So if the farmer's market is okay with that, my thought would be we start our event at 9 that day on the 31st. If they're not, maybe our event starts at noon. And you know, that way we have a couple different options. If the commission is good with those dates and would like to, you know, kind of define that, set it in stone with a motion, we can do that, pending what the farmer's market says. And I think that would just be the event either starts at 9 or 10 or noon or 1. And we could just discuss that at next month's meeting, depending on what I hear from them. Actually, we would need to discuss that prior to next month's meeting, so we would just send out some notifications via email.
And the dedication, is it just gonna be like, here, we're dedicating this tree, or are we gonna do it more educational, like you were maybe talking about, like here
I
to?
think doing an educational component would be fantastic.
So are we actually planting a tree on that date then and showing how, cause we're getting a little late in the season for a tree planting, but I don't know what the water situation is there, the irrigation.
We can get water over there.
Is it gonna be irrigated though, like on a system?
No, we don't have an irrigation system in the lot, but we
Okay.
can, you know, we could do water bags.
So the
and-
city could
and
like
we-
schedule waterings?
Yeah,
Okay,
we could do that.
then it'd probably be okay to plant the tree on that day if it's gonna be regularly watered.
Yeah,
We could do a planting and a mulching demonstration.
yeah, that'd be great.
Does the ginkgo plant very easily then? I mean, it's that one, I mean, you might not want to have two trees, you know, like the larch and the ginkgo, but you know,
Okay,
have
just
one
pick
already.
one.
Yeah, pick one, just pick one.
I agree, just
Yeah,
pick one.
yeah.
Planting one tree takes enough
Yeah.
time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
and
think we
have
just
the
do the
hole
one.
pre-dug
Yeah.
and like all your things there, yeah.
excellent.
Good, I mean, I'd entertain a motion for the date and location on that.
Yeah.
Anyone? so
I'll
inclined?
second that.
Oh. Okay, so okay, I'll make the motion. I'll move that we. I'll move that we hold our Arbor Day event on the date of May 31st for a start time of either 9 AM or 10 AM or noon or 1 PM pending farmer's market approval at Farm and Park. So is there a second to that?
Now I'll second.
Okay. Try to get this as clean as possible.
Yeah.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. So our last item under old and unfinished business, continuation of discussion on updating the arboricultural manual.
Yeah, and let me get a document up here. We're kind of running towards the end of our meeting time, but I kind of put together a brief high level summary of just chapters and things I think should be included. I wanted to kind of show if I can find my folder. There it is. Okay, good. I'm doing great here, guys. Apologies, bear with me. This is by no means finalized. It was just ideas I kind of pulled together. I was looking at manuals that other municipalities have and kind of using some of the stuff they have and what works, what doesn't. I found that these manuals nationwide, I looked at maybe 20 or 30 different ones. Some are extremely focused on kind of property owner type stuff, meaning if you're a residential property owner and this is a how-to for planting a tree, removing a tree, pruning a tree, gives you a little bit of background on pests, invasive species, things like that. It also gives you some info on how to properly plant a tree, how to properly prune a tree. It also tells you what the requirements are from the city, meaning permits and code and what you can do and what you can't do, things like that. And a lot of other ones really dive into technical nature things. I think there's merit to both. And I think we should have some technical nature things, but I think this manual is best positioned as a non-technical manual, meaning if you're not trained in trees or biology or horticulture, you can still understand it and don't have to go look up a whole bunch of other things. The technical side we can reference in appendices, but I see this as a manual that's digestible for everyone, and you don't have to be previously trained to pick this up and understand what you're doing. If you want to plant a tree in the right of way in your front yard and you don't know how to plant a tree, I think this manual should tell you how to do it. And I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel on that. ISA has all of these things kind of already put together. I would just reference those instead of recreating a section or a kind of construction detail or something like that. But with that said, I've kind of got some categories in here. One of the ones I was looking at this morning started off the manual with an FAQ section that I thought was a really great idea, because as I was reading through the FAQs, and I can send this around, they addressed a bunch of the questions I get when folks call me and are looking to do something with a tree on their property. And that could really help. I'm happy to answer those questions. That's not a concern at all, but a lot of folks just want to be able to look that up themselves. And if we had something like that in this manual, I think that would really be pretty cool. And then I've got, high level tree inventory stuff that I don't think most people know that we maintain a tree inventory and it's accessible online, and you can go on and see what's going on with trees in town. So just, a quick section on what that is and what its value is and how we use it and how you could use it as a resident or business owner. And then I've just kind of got a chapter in here, property owners, meaning what do you do if you want to do something to a tree or plant a tree or prune a tree? So permit and procedure, what's the responsibility of the property owner? What's the responsibility of the city? What what trees Sandpoint regulates, meaning trees in the public right of way or city property. And then getting into, some kind of pruning best practices, clearance standards, things like that. So if you've got a mature tree in, front of your house and you've got branches coming down that are 6 feet above the sidewalk, that's a concern, and those need to be 12 feet above the ground, things like that. Are the types of things I'm considering, that I think are worthy of consideration for including in here. And then moving on to something like tree planting. Here's what you do before you plant the tree, after you plant the tree, staking, tree maintenance, watering, encircling roots, mulching, fertilizing, pruning, again, etc. So I'm kind of trying to break these categories down a little bit. And then as I move further, tree location and spacing, it's the right tree, right place. And spacing is defined by city code, depending on the class of trees. Class 1 trees, smaller trees can be a little bit closer together, 2 a little further, et cetera, those sorts of things. And then, tree health, invasive species, insect control, like I was describing earlier. Referencing our urban forestry management plan. We don't need to duplicate the document in here, but hey, we have another document that has other information. I'm thinking about this manual tells you about an individual tree, what to do with an individual tree. Our urban forestry management plan is about the urban forest as a system, not so much considering individual trees. I see those as kind of 2 different documents. And then, the additional categories like you've got a tree that started to lean. Is it a hazard? Is it not a hazard? We can't define much of that in a manual, but we can tell you what to do when you see something like that and it's something that's concerning. And then there's a whole bunch of other things we can include, but appendices items, approved street tree list, prohibited street tree list, those are in our current manuals. Tree protection during construction, that might be where we cite some of the ANSI 300 information. Tree valuation, I'm not sure if that's necessary or not, but I think it's important knowing that, so folks know that there is a method to financially value a tree. There's multiple methods, but the 3 that the ISA defines in the Guide for Plant Appraisal might be a good one to just kind of include in here. And I'm sure there's lots of other things that should be included in here, but I will, we can certainly discuss this, but in the benefit of being responsible for all of our time here today, if anybody wants to, add, subtract, delete anything here right off the bat, feel free, throw it at me. But we'll get this sent around. Feel free to review. And if there's categories you want to add, send them over to me, just email them back to me. And I'll modify this document, and next month we can talk about it again with the commissioners' additions, deletions, comments, et cetera.
Do you have a working draft already started?
No, just this.
Okay.
Yeah, I was kind of putting this together in the last week of, I originally started by taking our arboriculture manual and I was like, I'm just going to start rewriting sections. And then I was like, you know what, I need to take a step back because this is a good manual, but I think there's other things we needed to consider for inclusion here, and some things maybe that are included now that shouldn't be. So I decided to just kind of put a, high level structure together. Like I said, none of this is set in stone. If you've got ideas or disagree or want to add something, let me know, because I think it's all worthy of consideration at this point.
Yeah.
But the
That's a
thought
good
is,
start.
to stay more 30,000 foot view rather than to get too granular.
I think so. And unless, commissioners have another opinion, I will happily change my mind if, there's reason to. In looking at this manual, I was kind of putting myself in the shoes of a resident that doesn't know anything about trees. Like what's the manual I would want if I was in that position? And I would want the basic information and, to get me started. And if I want to research more on health or whatever, I can do that or reach out to the city forester. But I'm up for, ideas, comments, discussion.
I'll try to keep this fairly brief because in the interest of time, I see some conflicts with the way the current manual is organized, and the inclusion of certain things, that probably shouldn't be included. And I do see the merit of, this is something residents can look at and say, oh, this is how you do this. This is a guideline for this. But the big problem that I'm seeing is that the city tree ordinance refers to the arboricultural manual, like again and again and again. And the ARB manual then has these categories for how do we do pruning correctly on trees. That's just one example, but these things are all outlined for the best management practices. That's what I have right here. These are the documents for best management practices in tree care. These are documents that are in conjunction to the ANSI standard. So the ANSI standard is like, this is one section of like 12 sections. This is about tree, shrub, and other woody plant management. These are standard practices for supplemental support systems. So this is like hundreds of pages of stuff. It's hard to digest for probably a homeowner. The ANSI standard itself is like a lot of definitions. If you haven't seen it, it's just like defining, you probably know, all the stuff. And then the best management practice that goes with it, each one of these has one of these little books. And this is actually quite digestible. So this is like paragraphs with diagrams and pictures about, this one is about tree planting. So these would be actually really helpful for homeowners if they want to know how to plant a tree. Everything they need is in this like slim little book here. So the issue I'm seeing is that the manual as we have it now basically replicates a lot of these. And these are put together by experts and revised, like, I think every year. And these are standards that are accepted across the country. So we would be spending a lot of time trying to like filter this stuff and put it in a separate document. Meanwhile, this is updated next year and ours doesn't get updated. So we're kind of reinventing the wheel by like trying to include all of these sections in our manual. So my idea is that we take out a lot of the ones that have to do with specifically, these are the rules for how you do it correctly. This is how you prune a tree. This is how you plant a tree. This is how you protect it during construction, because all of these things are already written up and done. But I think things that we should include, obviously a street tree list, that's very applicable to our locale. How close do we plant these sizes of trees? That's very applicable to what somebody needs to know on their property. So that's just, I want to throw that out there. I won't go too much more into depth on that, but I do have concerns that the city code as it is references this manual, and this manual does not meet the standards that we have here. So that's like a big, kind of like a big error area that we can fix. So throw that out.
Agreed, and maybe I didn't make it clear when I was kind of describing this, for things like tree maintenance and that manual you have there. My intention with this is to not recreate that or create our own, here's the best way to plant a tree, here's the best way to prune a tree, etc. All that stuff's already been developed and it's in those manuals. A lot of it is in publications that the ISA produces. I see just referencing those in this manual.
Yeah.
So under, for example, under section 3.5, 3.5.1 in my kind of structure here, before tree planting, for example, or tree planting as a whole. That's where we just reference one of those documents.
Yeah.
I
Great.
have zero interest in trying to define our own definition for that. We have certainly the knowledge in this room to come up with those definitions, but I don't like reinventing the wheel when it's already been invented. Nor do I want to try and create a definition when those definitions have been developed and vetted by, academics and industry professionals. Those are the people that we should be developing our stuff based on, and they've already developed it. So my opinion is we just reference it in this document.
Perfect. Yeah. So we
Um,
would throw out like, because right now there's in-depth information about those categories. We would discard that and replace it with like reference
exactly.
The ANSI A300 and best management practices in this area.
Yep.
Okay.
And we can modify city code accordingly. There's, like you said, there's references in city code to this manual that maybe there shouldn't be. And there's probably other there's other sections of the city code that don't reference the manual that maybe should. So I think we can define all of those. And I think kind of updating this manual, getting a structure for it, we don't necessarily have to have it, drafted, reviewed, et cetera, but getting a structure for it. And then figuring out, reviewing city code and figuring out what code sections would need to be updated as well. I think we can kind of do both at the same time. Because there are deficiencies in our city code or references in our city code to things that don't exist or are otherwise outdated. Just because, this manual was developed in 2002 and the science has moved on in the last 23 years.
So if this is, I mean, if the main purpose of this is to be a resource for landowners, I mean, it's probably, yeah, we want to say reference the technical information, because I've found in my job, if you get too technical, they're just gonna, the public's not gonna pay attention. They're not going to, but the ones that, genuinely want the more technical info, they'll research what you reference and provide to them rather than trying to sift through paragraphs and paragraphs, that they're just gonna glaze over or blow off.
Yeah, and to that point, when I was looking through different manuals from other municipalities, the majority of them were kind of in the 30 to 70 page range, I would guess. And one was like 767 pages. It's a really good manual, but it's that manual that, you're not gonna get people to read because they open it up and they're like, holy cow, this is 767 pages. I tend to think we're better off being on the shorter end, 30 to 40 pages, because
I agree.
that's a lot more digestible. We can certainly have, and I do have a whole folder of dozens of different references that I send folks when they want more information about this or that. And I think there's merit to having those additional documents available, but I don't think we need a 750 page manual for this either.
Ooh. I got one for my car, but I don't need it.
Well, great. We will, I'll send this out. Feel free to add, delete, modify, and then just email it back to me and I'll kind of compile everything for next month's meeting. And then send me those references you have. I've got a bunch that I, have been working off of, mostly ISA stuff.
I mean, these?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just send me the titles and then I can kind of pull them up and, likewise, if there's documents that you think we should include or reference in this update, please send them my way. And then we can all have a chance to review them. We can get them posted on the repository page.
It sounds like we also need to cross-reference what's in code, right, to make sure that that's properly reflecting what's actually in existence.
Yeah, and I think we should consider both at the same time, but we don't necessarily need to have the manual updated and the code updated and enacted at the same city council meeting, for example. We can update our manual and council can adopt it. And then we can do a code update after that. So, we need to be thinking about both at the same time, but we don't necessarily need to do 1A and 1B right after each other.
Yeah, I got a feeling this is gonna be a standing agenda item for a little while we hammer this out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was hoping by putting this structure together, it was at least a point where we could, everyone can take a look at it. Let me know what your thoughts are, and then we'll just refine that way. And then as we get into specific sections referencing some of those documents, we can plug those in and just start kind of building it.
Sounds good.
Excellent.
We'll revisit next month. So with no new business on the agenda, we'll move on to general announcements and comments. If there's any general announcements or comments from commissioners or staff.
I just wanted to say, there's an article in the Washington Post yesterday about which cities have the most trees. And you can pull up Sandpoint. And
Really?
you can see our tree cover and you can see the percent change over 5 years. I don't yet know where they got their data for this. But it's, yeah,
Fascinating.
yesterday, yeah, it's the title of the article is, which cities have the most trees? And you can look at Spokane, Sandpoint, big cities, small cities.
How do
Yeah.
we compare?
How do we compare? Well, I just had the map here. They say our tree cover is 26.6%. And over 5 years, it's gone up 1.2%. And it includes Dover, Ponderay, and across in Sago,
Cool.
on that map.
What municipality nationwide has the highest percentage tree cover? Did it say?
Let me guess, Savannah, Georgia.
It might be, DC.
That's probably a good guess, or DC's a good
DC
one
has a
too.
high.
Yeah, Boston perhaps, of
And who has the lowest? Phoenix.
course.
A lot of it.
And Las Vegas is number two.
Rock and concrete.
Yeah.
They're escaping, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
That's cool. I'm gonna look that up.
And they link it to help, how people respond to heat and, and that kind of stuff. And
Cool.
how trees provide all this great stuff. And anyway, I was surprised to see Sandpoint was listed.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Good find, yeah. Any other announcements or comments from staff or commissioners?
Question, I can't seem to find our document repository.
Sam just sent a link out.
Oh, good.
um,
Thank you.
Thank
20
you.
minutes ago.
Thave I don't know what happened. I just couldn't find it.
I have a hard time finding it too.
Yeah, thanks for.
That'll help.
Oh, and an announcement. So I have been putting together, because Arbor Day is tomorrow, I've been putting together a separate thing just because I'm excited about trees. So tomorrow at the YMCA, there's an Ask an Arborist booth. So tell all your friends, you can come ask me whatever you want about plants and trees. That's 9 to 11:30. And then there's a tree planting class and demonstration at the YMCA at 3 o'clock. On Saturday at the library, I'll do the same tree planting class and demonstration at noon at the library grounds. And then from noon to 3, there's like a celebration of trees. There'll be 5 or 6 arborists there, and we're doing all kinds of fun stuff like a knot tying station, make a tree ring ink print. So there's a little bit of art in there. There's a tree poetry contest going on for the next 2 weeks with cash prizes. What else? Another Ask an Arborist booth, but it won't be me, it'll be a different arborist. So yeah, stop by if you want to do some fun tree stuff, 12 to 3, library, Saturday. That's
A
all.
lot going on there.
Sounds like
Yes.
it's kid oriented too.
A little bit,
Yeah,
it's,
a little bit.
yeah, it's supposed to be just, there's nothing like specifically kid, but the kids could do the ink prints, or it could be like an adult who wants to frame something.
Right.
So it's a lot of hands-on, like fun stuff. Oh, and there's a raffle prize too. There's I think it's a star magnolia with a watering bag, so we'll raffle that off to somebody too.
Can we review as a commission the top 5 best tree poems? Since you said there was a tree poetry competition. We don't need to review and discuss. We can just put them up on, I'm just kidding. But I am fascinated what comes out of that. That's pretty.
Yeah,
I have a
yeah.
couple and I'm really impressed. It's really fun. They're coming to us. I think they're gonna be judged by the Friends of the Library. And they have some, like, in their group, they have some like retired teachers and like a pretty good background of. But if you guys wanna see those, I'm happy to share them, because I'm really impressed with the stuff that's coming.
If the teachers are reviewing them, that means they're gonna call you if your haiku doesn't follow like the 5-second
Yeah.
line. Like there's only 4 syllables in this one.
Right?
Well, that reminds me of just another announcement that I can make is that Native Plant Society is having their 3rd grade tree tours on May 26th, 27th, and 28th. So all the schools except for Sago and Southside are coming with their 3rd grade classes for tree tours. These are native trees, and then there's crafts and stuff. And I think there is haiku for those kids too.
Cool. Is that at the Arboretum?
At the Arboretum, yeah.
Excellent.
And those 3 schools are combining their 3rd grade classes all for one field trip.
No, it's over 3 days.
Yeah.
Yeah, so different schools come at different days, and I think it's gonna be a total of about 210 kids, which is kind of crazy.
It's a lot.
That's awesome. That's kind of crazy, but not a better age to
Yeah,
get the kids informed about
Right.
trees and all
We've
that
been
good
doing,
stuff.
doing it for at least 15 years.
That's awesome.
In May, the end of May, just before school's out, so.
Oh, I forgot. There's free tree seedlings Saturday at the library too. There's like 500 of them. So there will be bald cypress, river birch, and western white pine.
Cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
Good things happening in the spring.
Yeah.
No kidding.
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and announce that Thursday, May 8th is the Idaho State Forestry Contest at Farragut State Park, where there's several tree and vegetation related stations where students from across the state gather for, there's tree ID, there's noxious weed ID, which is the station that I lead. There's log scaling, there's silviculture exercise, there's a number of stations there, and
What was
that's
the date?
May 8th. Yeah, Thursday, May 8th at Farragut State Park. Yeah.
It's a good month for tree activity.
It is.
That's awesome. Jeff, what tree activity do you know about for May?
Oh,
There's gotta be another one.
Getting ready to host our annual, contractor training event, May 8th. I don't
There
know.
is another tree event. I was joking, but.
I mean, it's just for Vista contractors, but we're having our keynote speaker this year is gonna be Randy Miller. I don't know if you guys are familiar with him, but he's kind of a UVM. He co-authored the ISA utility specialist
Oh, excellent.
study guide, so pretty excited. I've done a little bit of work with Randy, but he's an incredible public speaker, so excited to listen and learn from him.
Awesome.
And then also, I don't know if anyone's in need of ISA CEUs, but I know Spokane County Conservation District is hosting some small events. Looks like this May 2nd, May 16th. Those ones are each $30, but there's a free event on May 6th. So if anyone's interested, please let me know.
Awesome.
Are they all in person or are they also?
I believe they're all in person. Looks like the first two are kind of morning times, but there's the one that's free. It's a wildfire awareness workshop is May 6th, 5:30 to 7. 3 credits. So
Yeah, can always use those CEUs.
Good. Counselor Schreiber, did you have any comments or announcements?
I don't, but thanks for asking.
Okay. Anything else here? No more comments? Okay. So hearing none, we will go ahead and stand adjourned at 4:46 PM. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Guys, thanks, Kyle. Hope you feel better.